I felt that he saved our company. He was a North Korean. And he got up out of the snow in front of me with his hands up. And the poor guy had no hat, no gloves, wearing tennis shoes. They were very poorly equipped, you know. He told us that they were planning on hitting us at 1 o'clock in the morning. This was at night when he surrendered. And so we got artillery all zeroed in front of us.
Did they attack?
Yeah. So you never know what's going to happen day to day, you know.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served war zone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear our first combat story from a Korean War veteran, Joseph Mills Wise. Joe was injured while on the front lines in 1951 as an infantryman engaged in fighting that, to this day, and understandably, has not left him. When Joe was medevaced out of the combat zone, he also had frostbite on both feet. He was able to recover only to be sent back to Korea. While this fighting took place 70 years ago, it's amazing how so many parts of the veteran experience don't change, from getting letters from your wife, to sneaking off base in the trunk of a car, freezing outside in the cold, humping a massive radio and weapon, and so much more. Joe's part of a silent generation of warriors who, for the majority of his life, did not share these moments of horror with his family and instead kept them inside. At 94 years old, he agreed to sit down and share his stories with us. His wife Joice was in the room for our interview and experienced Joe's war through letters and telegrams, and then, like many military spouses, was the one who supported Joe through the years of nightmares and pain that came with seeing combat firsthand. This was an honor for me and a reminder of this war that came so close on the heels of World War II, but with a very different experience for those who fought in it. The war was not even recognized as a war for many years. Please stay tuned at the end of this combat story to hear Joe and Joice talk about their experiences together in this war, from when he ships out to the letters he gets when he's there, the letters he sends back, telegrams that go back and forth, and his return home. It's pretty special to hear from both perspectives and something we rarely get on the show. With that, please enjoy this little bit of history from someone who lived it on the front lines, and I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us.
Well, I like to share.
One of the things I wanted to start out with is your childhood. My understanding is you grew up in Hawaii during a pretty pivotal moment in American history, and I know we'll talk about Korea, but I wanted to start with Pearl Harbor. If you could share kind of what your childhood was like there.
Well, as far as my childhood, I felt like nobody could ever have a childhood like I did, because me and my brother were good friends, and we did a lot together. And during Pearl Harbor event, we had a Japanese neighbor, Chinese neighbor, and a Puerto Rican neighbor. And this was on Sunday morning. On Sunday, my mom always cooked hotcakes, you know. And so me and my brother, we were good friends. I'm sorry if I break up.
No, it's all right.
Anyway, we went outside, and the Japanese neighbor's car wouldn't start. He had an old car. In those days, too many people didn't have cars, you know. So he was pushing it, and me and my brother went out there to help him push the car. And when we were pushing the car, we noticed an aircraft fire all over the sky, you know, towards Pearl Harbor. And we lived about 3 miles from Pearl Harbor. And a lot of people don't know it, but Pearl Harbor and Hickam Field, the only thing that separated those two was the fence. There was that, you know, together. And a flight of Japanese bombers came over our house. And it was so low you could throw rocks at them, you know. And being the kids, we didn't know, Japanese from what. But the fellow that owned the car, he looked up in the air when the Japanese flew over the house, and he started to shake, and he told us it was Japanese. So we ran home, me and my brother, and my dad, he got discharged out of the Army before, I don't know what year it was. It was far before Pearl Harbor. But anyway, he tried to get back in the Army because he was discharged a few years earlier. And they wouldn't take him because he had a big family and his age and all that. So then he volunteered to be a volunteer, not game one. I'm trying to say game one, but air raid warden. And those days, you couldn't even smoke a cigarette outside. And so we had to board our windows up with tar paper at night. We had brackets, we hung them over the windows because it was total blackout.
You didn't want any lights visible for bombing?
For bombing, yeah. And anyway, everyone in Hawaii was issued gas masks because they was afraid they was going to use gas. So and if you went to school, everywhere you went, you carried a gas mask. If you forgot it, they send you home. So anyway, my sister, she lived right in Hickam Housing. There's a housing unit there. And she ran all the way to our house, which we lived about 3 miles from Pearl. And a Japanese plane was on fire. So she thought it was going to hit her house. It was that close. So she was scared, which is normal. And anyway, from then, as time went on, my mom, well, first of all, we had a tank corps. We had a place close to our house that was like a jungle, and they used that for camouflage for the tanks. And my dad felt bad that he couldn't help in any way. So he got acquainted with the soldiers in the tank corps there. And he would go and get them on a weekend and bring them to our house, entertain them. And I thought it was always so funny the way they talked, the Southern accent.
Yeah.
Because you probably think those that raised there talk funny too.
That's
And
right.
Anyway, that was broke my mom and dad out because my dad felt he should entertain the troops to help, help
Just to do
troops,
something to help.
And anyway, my mom couldn't take that no more because have a bunch of drunk soldiers around the house
That's not easy.
So they got a divorce, and I came here with my dad and my brother, and we had 5 kids in the family. The rest of them stayed with my mom in Hawaii, and he brought us to California.
Can I ask, Joe, on the day of that attack at Pearl Harbor, you ran back home? What was the feeling like in the house? Like, were you turning on the radio, listening? What did you do that day?
What we did is my dad got all the furniture, and we had a big house there. He worked for Sam Damon, and Sam Damon is the guy that owned lots of property in Hawaii because his great-grandfather was buddy-buddy with the king of Hawaii, so he inherited all that land, and we lived there on the land, and it was free rent and everything, so my dad had a good job working for him, So I don't know if I can think of anything else as far as Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And Oh, we built air raid shelters. The Japanese dug a hole in his yard and drove the car down in the hole and buried the car with a tunnel going into it. That was an air raid shelter. And our family and the Chinese neighbor that we had, we had about 4 date trees that was real low to the ground. So we put boards around it and threw a lot of rocks and dirt and made an air raid shelter out of that, you know.
Jeez.
And we used it a couple of times because one night my brother seen it, I didn't see it, but the air raid sirens went off. So when they go off, you head for shelter,
Yeah.
you know. And he seen it silhouetted. You had a bright moonlight. He saw the plane silhouetted going across the sky, you know. And the military didn't do anything until he went out to sea. Then they shot it down.
They did.
You know.
When you came back to the kind of the continental U.S., how old were you at that time?
I was 13 when the bombing.
With the bombing, okay.
Tells my age.
All right. What made you want to join the military in the first place?
What?
Why did you want to join the military?
Oh, I
eventually?
didn't join the military. I was drafted.
There you go.
That
There's
was
always
it.
one option. How old were you at that time?
When I was drafted?
When you were drafted, yeah.
I mean, I was 21, I guess.
And could you give us just, for people who aren't familiar with what the feeling was like in the country at that time, what did it feel like being drafted at that point in time? Yeah, what was America like at that point?
Oh, you mean when I came over here?
Yeah, maybe in your high school days.
Oh, well, in my high school days, everything was so different. The schooling was different. And they taught you, like in place of U.S. history, it was Hawaiian history.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very difficult for me because being that age and then come to this country and the schooling was so different, you know. So I had a heck of a time. So,
how about the feeling during World War II? So obviously you were early teens
yeah.
during World War II. What do you remember of that war? Just the atmosphere of being in Hawaii, in continental U.S. How do you remember that war?
Well, I remember it very well, being there when the Pearl Harbor was bombed. And I used to, every day I'd buy a newspaper and I would cut the articles out about the war. And I had a pretty thick scrapbook of the war. And
why did you do that, Joe? Why did you keep the
I don't know. I really don't. I just was interested in the war, I guess. And I kept it up until the atomic bomb. Every day I would buy a newspaper and cut the articles of war out of it, put it in the scrapbook. And right now I don't have the scrapbook with me, but I gave it to my grandson.
That's great.
So he could have it, you know. And I lost a lot of the articles on the war because my dad remarried, you know, in Orville here. And somehow or another, I just lost a lot of articles because I would buy the newspapers, and when I had the time, I would cut the articles out and paste it in the newspapers. See?
That's interesting. Right after 9/11, I remember I was in college at the time, getting ready to go into the Army, and I remember following the war in the newspaper at the time, because it was still before the internet was big, and every day I would get the newspaper and read about where the forces were, these Green Berets jumping into Afghanistan, riding on horses. So I definitely understand that feeling. Was there any for you, with World War II going on, did you want to be over in World War II? Was there any desire to be over in Europe or Asia, or were you just hoping for it to end?
I tried to join the Marine Corps, and my dad wouldn't sign because I was too young to go in without permission from the parents, you know. So I just lived in Orville. You know. When we left Hawaii, I don't know whether you heard about the Japanese Army. That is American Japanese Army. They call them Go for Broke.
No, tell me.
Well, they were famous in World War II. They were all Japanese American citizens, and they performed so well. They have a museum in Hawaii that has all the
great
pictures and everything of that particular unit, you know. So, I don't know, it's just everyday thing for me to get a newspaper and paste it in my book. It was about that thick, you know.
When you were drafted, how did you feel about that, since you had tried to join the Marine Corps earlier?
Well, no, that was afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards. So now, look, were you worried, excited? What was the feeling then?
Well, I was in the National Guard in Orville.
Okay.
And I got out of it because I moved up to Quincy. I worked at a sawmill in Quincy. And I met Joice at a dance in Paradise. They used to have dances every Saturday night, you know. So I met her up there, and I used to come down every other weekend, just like clockwork, to see her, you know. And anyway, we got married, and then
what year was that, Joe?
Oh, crime! Yeah, she might have it.
Joice might have to.
Yeah.
50,
Oh, then not in 50. It was 50.
So
yeah.
Pivotal year, obviously, when you talk about the Korean War.
Yeah, it was because we got married, then we went back up there to Quincy to the sawmill, and we lived in an old shack.
Yeah.
It belonged to the sawmill, the shacks, you know. But I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to bring back whatever happened. Oh, there was the guys. I got out of the National Guard because I had to work in Quincy. I couldn't communicate, and they came up and told me to get back in the National Guard because my name came up in the draft list. So I told them, I said, look, if they want me, they're going to have to come and get me because I will not dodge the draft. And anyway, I got drafted, went to Camp Stoneman, where I took my basic training. And she didn't even know how to drive a car, I guess. She drove all the way without a license. So she went and got a license.
This is Joice.
Yeah, she went to San Francisco, where her mom was living at the time, and not having much training, but taking a car and driving it herself. She drove all the way to San Francisco, picked up her mom, drove all the way to Camp Stoneman to where I was.
Camp Roberts? Is that it, Joice? Okay.
Oh, that was a place. Camp Roberts, when they took us there, it had grass knee-high all over because the bases weren't used after the war. They just left them there. So all we did, I thought, is this the Army, you know?
Yeah.
All that we were doing was digging weeds and stuff like that, you know?
That sounds like the Army that I
know. Yeah.
So you got married and then you got drafted?
Yeah.
And you mentioned you didn't want to dodge the draft. Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I just felt it's not what you do. And so they drafted me, which I didn't like, but what can you do, you know?
Just a quick word from our sponsor and we'll get right back to this combat story. As you know, I live in California where we can have earthquakes and fires, and I grew up in Florida with hurricanes. I know firsthand how natural disasters can quickly and unexpectedly put me and my family in a position where we have to hunker down, shelter in place, and sometimes without power, so I always want to have food available. You can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots Survival Food Kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years super survival food. Handpicked right in a family-owned facility in the U.S., giving jobs to over 200 Americans, which we love. The kits are compact, sturdy, water-resistant, and stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use the code COMBAT to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including their 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com and use COMBAT to get 10% off. That's the number 4patriots.com. Use the code COMBAT and start building your own stockpile today. And now, back to this combat story. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what the feeling was like for the Korean War at that time?
Well, at that time, I really didn't think too much of it because I was drafted and was just too busy doing whatever the Army wants you to do, you know?
Yeah.
So I was trained in Camp Roberts. Then after the training cycle, your training group goes either to Germany or Korea. Well, those that we had 2 guys that could speak German real good, you know, they went to Germany.
They went to Germany? Yeah.
So anyway, after the basic training, they called me in the office because she took care of my laundry. Everything was fitted tightly, you know, with the military stripes on it. And she took care of my laundry, and it looked good, everything was fitted tight. Some poor people, they looked like they just threw them a clothes here you go, you know, and they fit them like a sack over them. Well, I had mine all tailored, and they kind of liked the way I was, I guess, because they offered me a promotion, because everybody was privates. And they offered me a promotion of a corporal if I wanted it, you know. So I told them, I said, I'd like to sleep on it. So Joice and I talked it over. And I told Joice, I said, I should turn it down because I didn't like the service. And I should turn it down. And then I was going to go to Korea afterwards. Cause what to do, they promoted me. I would be in a taking care squad of men. And that's after my training. So anyway, I told Joice that about refusing the promotion and just go over Korea because I know I was going to go one way or the other. So they, sure enough, shipped me to Korea, you know.
Had you ever been outside of the United States or Hawaii at that time?
No.
No. And what, did you go in 1950, Joe, over to Korea?
Well, we got married in 1950. Then I went back to work up there in Quincy. Then they drafted me from Quincy.
And when did you end up going over to Korea?
Going over there? Well, I don't know whether it was after a year, I guess, or less than a year, because after training, that's when they shipped you out.
So 1951, somewhere around there, in there.
There's something that's kind of funny. After training, everybody got their orders to where they're going. And Joice, I had a 1941, I think, Chrysler business coupe. And they shipped us to Camp Stoneman, Then from Camp Stoneman, they put you on a ship, you head for San Francisco, got off of that, got on another ship, and then they ship you over. But this one guy I met at Camp Stoneman, he wanted to go out on pass. I said, I got acquainted with him. So he wanted me to have Joice drive us out in the trunk of the car.
To sneak out? You weren't allowed to go?
Well, all we had to do is wait till an hour or so, go get the pass and go out on pass, you know. So he talked me into it. I didn't want to do it. I said, let's wait until it's time to, you know, fall in formations and all that. Then they call you as to what's going to happen to you. And so he talked me into getting in the trunk of the car, and his wife and Joice drove out, was going to drive us out. So I guess she looked kind of nervous to him. So he come up to her, the guard gate, we go in and out of the base. He says, is your trunk open? So she, being what she is, she's honest. She says, no, I mean, yes, it's open. So he goes back there and opens the trunk, and I felt like a mouse hiding in the corner. And he called us out, said, get out of there. And he called a paddy wagon on us. And just lucky the paddy wagon was gone. It was out on a call. And so he gave us a few words and sent us off. Went back to the base, got a pass, and drove out off another gate because we didn't want to meet him again. And here he was at the other gate that we went out. So anyway.
He'd seen this one before, I think. There'd probably been other privates trying to get out of that base in the same way.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So
were you already assigned to a unit before you shipped out, or did you fall into a unit when you arrived?
When you arrived, I fell into a unit.
How did you get there, Joe, from the U.S.? So
boat.
So from the California coast, you said San Francisco, and then from there?
From San Francisco, yeah. It took us from, I can't even think of that name. Anyway, the camp that I was in, they shipped us there, the one I tried to get out.
Tried to escape.
So anyway, the next morning, they shipped us by ferry to San Francisco. Then from there, we got off of the ferry and got on a troop ship.
Okay.
Then we sailed on out.
Do you remember that trip at all?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I thought I wouldn't come back home. Oh. Mainly because, you know, I had a chance of not going over there right away, but I would end up there anyway. That's why I didn't take that promotion. But when we got aboard ship, there was a guy, a friend of mine, I never will forget him. His name was Andy Serifer. He was a Greek. He was all the way across to Korea, and he got lost. And luckily, he reported to another unit. So he stayed in South Korea all the time. He didn't get in any battles.
Okay. Wow.
So,
do you remember saying goodbye to Joice?
Yeah, I said goodbye to her at the base, well, boy, my mind is something else. Anyway,
I don't remember where I deployed from either, so don't worry. I remember saying goodbye though to my wife.
Yeah, we said goodbye, and the next day I didn't get to see her because we all got on a ferry boat headed for San Francisco. And she went and got her mom in San Francisco and her sister. And they drove from Camp Stoneman to San Francisco. And then I tried to get up on deck so I could see her, you know. Well, we had a far as I'm concerned, he was a no-no. You know, this officer confined us to our quarters. He wouldn't let us go on deck. And I found out the deck was full of GIs, seeing their loved ones. And as the ship went out, she drove clear to I can't think of that house on the, right on the...
In San Francisco?
Yeah.
The
right.
Presidio up there?
No, not the Presidio. Cliff House.
Cliff House.
She stayed there until the ship was out of sight, you know.
Wow.
Then when we got out, we were out of sea there, they had a mail call. And I had about 3 or 4 letters.
Already?
That she wrote.
Wow.
So,
did you read them right there?
Pardon?
Joe? Did you end up reading those right then?
Oh, yeah. And anyway, we went, they always ask for volunteers to box the next day to entertain the troops aboard ship. And I was standing behind this one guy, and he kept criticizing the boxes, 2 guys that volunteered to box. So I got so tired of hearing him criticize them guys. So I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "You want to box tomorrow?" He looked at me and he said, "You know how to box?" I said, "Well, I did a little bit of it." He said, "Sure, I'll box with you." And the good Lord must have been looking over me, because it stormed the next day. And it stormed all the way to Japan, so I didn't get to box.
There you go.
He might have cleaned my clock, you know, because I didn't know the guy from Adam, you know. So.
How long was that boat ride?
Oh, crying, I don't know. It was a while.
It was a while.
And plus we zigzagged a lot. You could see where the wake was, you know, in the water.
16 days, Joice says.
16. So she knows more about it than I do.
On that boat, Joe, I'm curious if you made any friends besides your Greek friend Alex, who was AWOL. Any other people that you met that you stayed with when you got to Korea, or were you all assigned to different units?
No, when we got to Korea, we were, first we went from San Francisco to Tokyo. Then we took over the college dome. The military took it over from the Japanese, so we stayed there. And then the next day, they took us to Korea. Then when I got to Korea, there was just everybody didn't know what to do, you know, all messed up. So it was more like, well, it scared the heck out of me. I won't, because guns are going off, artillery and everything. So then they all got us all together, and then they called names and as to what unit you're going to. So they called my name, and me and another guy, this other guy was something else. They took us by 6x trucks, and we drove all day going to our unit. And our unit was on the front line then. So they took us to where the company was, and the only thing was there in the company was the supply sergeant that kept the thing open, I guess. And we slept there that night. Then the next morning they took us by truck, followed the creek up the mountain, and they took us as far as they can with the truck. So we got out. Then the sergeant came out, woke us up. We're going to go up to the front to where the company was. So anyway, he took the pack. They gave us full fill packs, you know. And he took the pack from the other guy that was with me, and he volunteered to give his pack to a Korean. And Koreans were small guys, you know. And we hiked and hiked. We hiked almost all day to get to the front. And
And you'd already been issued your supplies.
Yeah.
The supply sergeant kind of gave you those,
Yeah.
drove you up. So what weapon did you have at the time?
well, at the time it was more personal, except your rifle. They handed me a M2 rifle, and they gave him a rifle and a pack. And then we headed out, following that creek way up to the top of the hill. And this guy, they were so steep that they made steps up the hill. They cut like steps, going to the top. And this other guy, he couldn't carry his pack. He wore himself out. So they took the pack and gave it to the Korean. And them Koreans just had a ball laughing, because it made me feel like I was next, They're going to wear me out next. So I thought, boy, they ain't going to laugh at me,
You're not going to give them your pack?
So I carried my own pack,
That's great.
So then we got up there and we went to a tank outfit, and the tank commander, in charge of the whole tank unit, gave us a pep talk, So from there, they took me to the 7th Infantry.
7th Infantry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from there, it's on the front just for a short while.
Can you describe what it was like checking into that unit for the first time?
Doing what?
The first time when you arrived and meet the other guys in your squad or in the unit, what did that feel like?
Well, you really didn't get to know each other. I don't know why, but you just didn't. And they put me in down below the front line. He asked me if I knew anything about a radio. I said, no, I know nothing. I learned never to volunteer for anything. So he comes up to me, he said, I told him I know nothing about a radio. So he comes up to me and feels my shoulders, oh, you make a good radio man. Well,
he heard that you carried your own pack, probably.
Well, I carried a radio, which was World War II radios. They were about like that, plus your pack. And anyway, I had met the sergeant. His name was Watry. And there's only 2 radio men. The sergeant, which was he's a good guy. And anyway, right away, he and I got to be good friends. And he said, Joe, I'm going to put you in for a corporal, because we were all buck privates, So but I never got it, because after I got hurt, I was moving around from one place to the other. And my paperwork just never caught up with me, But I was a radio man. And this other guy thought he was too good to be a radio man, because he was I think a lieutenant in the National Guard. And he got out and he got drafted. And he didn't think he was good enough to be a radio man. Well, they got rid of him because we went on a patrol, and he had the Korean carry his radio, because they get pretty heavy after a while.
Yes.
So I wouldn't let him take mine, I just carried my own. So anyway.
Joe, can you describe the first time you found yourself on the front lines in?
Well, after a while, you don't even think of dying. I just don't know why, but you get so you don't think about it, and you just do whatever you have to.
I've interviewed 120 veterans now, and I feel this way as well, and I've heard this quite a bit, where there's a certain point I think, whether it's when you leave your family or you see somebody else get hurt, where mentally to be effective and survive, you almost have to have a mentality of,
Yeah.
I could die and it's okay. Everything at home will be okay.
Yeah, I don't know, you get used to it or something that you don't think about it, except if you got a friend that got hurt, you know. I had one Mexican guy, we got to be good friends. And during the battle one time, he had his grenade on his belt, and he squeezed the pin so it could pull out easy. And he was standing in his foxhole, and the grenade fell, the pin came out, and just blew up at his feet. And I helped bandage him up. And you know, he looked at me, he says, he said that we won't.
It's all right.
Anyway, he and I got to be good friends, and we was melting the snow. We had snow about knee deep. We was melting the snow to make hot chocolate, and I would make one for the lieutenant because he and I were like that. He wanted me to be with him when we go on patrol. The other guy they got rid of because he was a no-no. He knew everything, you know. So anyway, they shipped this guy out because his both feet were just blowed all to hell, you know. So I never got to see him anymore. So
Can you tell me a little bit more about the sergeant who you were close with? What, Wachter, is that his name?
Watcher, I think it was Watchery.
Watchery.
You remember, only way you're not going to remember him, I think, of Gene Autry.
Okay. Hey, that's a good one. Yeah.
I got to relate
Yeah.
you related to something else. And he and I were real close. He was a real nice guy. And he told me that he was going to put me in for corporal because that was the rank the radio man has. And I never did get it because I was
You kept moving around.
Moving around a lot. The time your paperwork catch up with you, you're going somewhere else, you know. But I don't know. I made some good friends there, but you don't get too close, you know. Well, for one thing, you're busy all the time, you know. So.
Can you explain what was a normal day like when you were on the front lines there?
Well, a normal day was really not much because you were just there and you could see him. You could see the enemy on another hill. And one thing I thought was real exciting was we was on this hill and I was got up listening. I could hear airplanes. I got up and there's AT-6, it's the Army plane. He was an observer. He would circle where the enemy was, and then he would dive down and he would drop a smoke bomb where he wanted the airplanes to hit. And then there would be 5 P-51s. They put out one hell of a show. They would come, you could hit them with a rock. They'd come right over our hill, and it was down like this and there and then up again. Well, they would come right over our hill and drop the napalm or bombs, whatever they had. And this AT-6, he'd be way up there, circling, keeping an eye
Observing,
on things.
yeah.
And anyway, when they run out of ammo, the 51s, they came over our hill doing a slow roll, you know.
That's cool.
That was quite exciting.
That's a beautiful aircraft.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So anyway, they gave us their support. And without them, you'd be in a pretty bad shape, you know.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to happen day to day, you know. Like we have a Korean I felt that he saved our company. He was a North Korean. And we, like I say, the snow was pretty deep. And he got up out of the snow in front of me with his hands up. And the poor guy had no hat, no gloves, wearing tennis shoes. They were very poorly equipped, you know. And he came up there with his hands up, so I turned him over to the authorities. Then, he was the one that I thought he saved the company because he he told us that they were planning on hitting us at 1 o'clock in the morning. This was at night when he surrendered, and he told us. And so we got artillery all zeroed in front of us, and then they would shoot flares. Those flares will make it like daylight, you know, so bright. And if it wasn't for him, things would have been different, you know, because we got all ready for artillery and everything. So I felt that he helped us a lot that night, you know.
Did they attack?
Yeah. So anyway, you don't know who when you're attacking or they're attacking, because when you shoot somebody, you don't think nothing of it because you're just there, you know. It's either you or them, you know. So I don't know. We moved from one place to the other. We stay maybe 2 weeks at this position, and we go and relieve another position. And her sister-in-law's brother, oh, that poor guy, he got shot up real bad. Both knees, you know. He passed away, I don't know, not too long ago. He lived out of Chico. But he didn't pass away because of the wounds, you know.
Would you end up, you said you never knew what was going to happen day to day, but would you end up in contact with the enemy most days, or was it mostly just holding positions?
Like me and the lieutenant, we had 3 lieutenants in our group, and all 3 of them were from World War II.
Wow.
And I never will forget them. The commander was Fitzpatrick. Then we had a guy named Pozzoli.
Sure, they got along well, huh?
Then we had Fitzpatrick, Pozzoli, and Lieutenant Gundrum. I thought that was a funny name. But I remember we were sitting there talking, and every once in a while you hear a shell. You can tell the difference by the sound, whether it's coming to you or whether it's going over you. It sounds different. Because I was always hitting the ground, and this Korean was on the hill, you know, hitting me. He said, "Daijobi." In other words, that's okay. He says, "You go that way." You know? He'd been there so long, he can tell by the sound of the shell whether it was going or coming, you know. So I got told, you get that way after a while.
What would you do to pass the time when you had time?
Well, I used to have to go on patrol all the time because there's only 2 of us, 3 of us.
Radio
operators, and you got to have a radio
You have to.
operator. Yeah. So I was the junior radio man, so I was on patrol.
You were always on patrol.
So we never, one thing we encountered one time on patrol was the South and North Korea, and we were having a gun battle, you know. That's the only time. And I know this black soldier we got to talking, and he was scared to death. He said, "Why don't we get out of here?" You know, and because they were shelling quite a bit. But I don't know, you get so you kind of, it's like a job, you know. So
I remember we used to live in Washington, D.C. when my kids were really young. and we'd go to the memorials, and we saw the Korean War Memorial, and they've got obviously the statues of
in D.C.
in DC, the
Wasn't that
squad.
something?
It's amazing, and I almost feel like they designed it to look even more impressive in the wintertime.
Yeah. Did you see the Korean one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
fantastic.
I thought the Marine one, when they was raising the flag, I thought that one and the Korean one were the best of all statues around there.
And I was just wondering, because I think that the radio operator in the squad the statues is pretty prominent. Like you could see the pack, and it's kind of this wedge formation that they're in. Did it feel like that? Like as you look back on that statue?
Well, no, because every time we never did go on a patrol where the way they showed there, you know. You went on a patrol, just a group of guys in line, you know, and I don't know why I did it, but I did, is we went on patrol. They took us by a 6x truck, and it was still dark in the morning. We got out and went on a patrol, and they picked us up another area. And being a radio man, I had a radio there where I was aware of what was going on being the radio. And I was with the lieutenant, except when you're going on, taking the hill, you go up a hill like a squad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the radio man, he's got to be following the lieutenant. And that lieutenant, all he's got is a sidearm. And he's going up, keeping the group going up the hill. And I got so tired, I couldn't follow him because all he had was himself. And here I am with a weapon and the radio. So I was chasing him more or less, following him, so he knew where I was if he needed the radio. So then he seen that I was tired. I told him, I said, I can't go no more. So he said, well, you stay right here in the middle and head for the top so I'll know where you're at in the middle so you can, you know, go
Get
either
back
way.
Yeah.
And boy, it was something else. But I don't know, you get so, it's just something you got to do, you know. So.
What was one of the tougher operations or encounters you had?
Oh, the toughest one was we left a place called a Punch Bowl. I don't know if you heard or not.
No.
From on top of the mountains, it looks like a punch bowl. You know, the mountains all around it. And what was I going to say? Well, when you get my age, you forget.
When you're my age, I feel this way. But I was asking what one of the tougher operations you experienced.
That was from the Punch Bowl. We was in the Punch Bowl, and we had to go on the front. So we left that afternoon. I don't know, the sun was still up, you know, late afternoon. We hiked all night long to get to the front. And I can still remember I slipped because I was the last man in the squad, you know, because the front there was a lieutenant and he's a radio man, and I was the last one in the back. And we hiked all day and night, not all day, but from about 4 o'clock on. We hiked all that time, and I slipped, and they grabbed me. Probably wouldn't have been here. It was icy, real icy, and got up on top of the hill with a group of soldiers, GIs were, you know, and they were in the front line, and I remember passing them, and one of them hollered at me, get down, you know. I didn't know we was marching, getting up there, you know. And I can never will forget, I was so tired packing that radio. And I told the lieutenant, I said, I don't know if I can go anymore, you know, because packing your weapon and the radio, that's a lot of weight. And I got up there and he told me, he said, we just got a little ways to go. So he said, we'll stay here and then we'll take off early. So I still will remember this was I laid down next to a Korean soldier. He had no head. He just got blown away. And the only reason I did that because it was on a hill. I figured if a shell hit below us, he would get it before I would, you know. So it didn't bother me. Well, it probably did to a certain extent. But anyway, next morning, the guy came up and said, "You realize what we was laying down with, you know?"
He said, "Yeah, I do."
So anyway, it was quite an excitement trip. There's a lot more to it, but things you forget or don't want to remember. And like when we had, well, we was being attacked that one night, and so I think the lieutenant thought I was cracking up because he said something and I couldn't answer him. And I helped the medic all night long, dragging the guys in and patching them up. And I don't know, dragged the guys in and patched them up. You know. Oh, then this one guy, it's had a young man that was shot up real bad. And I can't forget it.
You were pulling him to the medics area.
Anyway, I helped patch him up that night. I drug him. Every time I drag him, he would scream. He was shot up real bad. And I pick him up by the arms pits and drug him. And every time I did that, he would scream. And I got him in the bunker. Anyway, we patched him up the best we can. And we had morphine that we gave him. And the next morning, daylight, we had to get the wounded to the rear echelon. And this poor kid, he cried all night. He cried for his mom. And I had to get him out. So I got him by the armpits and drug him out. And he had a big old chunk of metal in his head. And I found out why he was screaming every time I tried to move him. This arm was broken. And every time I drag him, it was like a plow, plowing the snow, you know. Anyway, there are things that happen that you don't forget.
Yeah.
But the happiest guy, I guess, is the guy that gets hit, because they're going to ship you
out. Now, you got hit, didn't you?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, it was freezing weather up there. It was all snow and ice, and you slept right out there in it. And they're supposed to send us shoe packs. And mine never did show up, so I went to check on my shoe packs, and they started throwing artillery at us, and that's what got me, was the artillery shell. And then from then I went to Japan.
Where'd you get hit?
I got hit on my left, on side of my knees. Got two scars there, but I was lucky.
Was there a moment where you felt like, now I can get out of here?
Yes,
Yeah.
because I was able to make my way to the medics, and the medics dressed my wounds up, and he says, "Boy, you're lucky you're going stateside." But I didn't go to stateside. After a month in the hospital, they shipped me, the doctor was real nice. I used to, it was kind of funny, because we took over this big school, college building, like, for the GIs. They took me to the hospital, and they left me sitting out there for a long time, and it was freezing weather. So I finally seen a nurse walking by. I got her attention, and she came over to me and said, "Oh, I thought you were dead."
They just had you sitting outside.
And I was freezing, just laying on that gurney, So, anyway, it was quite an experience.
You didn't get to go back home after that?
No, they sent me to, the doctor wanted me to go to Okinawa because I had frostbite laying there. I couldn't, I got frostbite, and it's safe because you can't stay in cold weather when you get frostbite. And they sent me to this other hospital, and I had an officer I guess he was a doctor or something, and that really teed me off because I handed him my papers, and he looked it over, and he got this stamp, and he stamped it, and I looked, I couldn't believe it, stamped it, Korea, go back to Korea. So anyway, I went back to Korea, and they put me in as a truck driver, semi. I don't even know how to drive a truck driver, semi,
Yeah.
especially the Army ones. Well, what was funny was that I had to go, they sent me to a trucking outfit. I was a battalion dispatcher, and a battalion dispatcher calls for a sergeant's rating. I was a private, and that treated me off, And what was bad was that it was like going to a job. You get up in the morning, get dressed, and go to work. And anyway, I was a buck private doing a sergeant's job,
Yeah.
And there's two other guys who were in the same boat. And it was like going to work. So I was in the office one day, and somebody called a guy I work for. This was like a job, and the guy in charge was a black captain. And I remember him picking up the phone. Somebody called, wanted to know. I heard the conversation. Wanted to know if he had anybody there wanted to promote, because they was going to bring in a bunch of National Guards that already had rank, and they only allow so much rank. And I heard him say, "No, I don't have nobody." And that just cheated me off worse.
What more can you do?
Doing the sergeant work all the time in buck private,
And they didn't send you back to the front lines then?
No,
right?
because I would have, except my feet were frozen. That's the only thing kept me from going back, was my feet.
When you were on the front line, Joe, were you writing letters back home to Joice?
Oh, she wrote every day. And the mailman would come by. This is when we was in the reserve. After you're in the front for so long, they pull your unit out and replace you with somebody else. And we had big squad tents. And this mailman would come there, mail call, he'd all that. So I got to him and said, "You got any mail for Wise?" And he would open the bag and smell like that. He said, "Yep, we got mail for wives." She would sprinkle powder in the letters, you know. And so when I opened it, we had a bunch of guys all coming like hungry dogs, just sniffing at my mail. And he'd give me my mail, and I'd open the letter, and she had powder inside the envelopes. So I got the envelope, opened it up, and I walked through the tent sprinkling the powder. Oh, that's about the only thing that's funny that you're up there with. But she wrote every day, and I wrote whenever I could, you know. In frontline, you might as well forget it, but you get a bunch of mail at one time. So she was real good.
Would you, when you did have a chance to write back, would you write about what was happening on the front?
No, not really, no. No, I never did. The only time I wrote and told her that I was hurt, because I didn't want her to get a telegram and worry about it, you know. So if she heard from me, then she knew I was all right. So.
But you didn't want to tell her about some of the harder stuff going on.
No, there's a lot of things that I could tell, you know, but I don't know. It's hell, I tell you. These war movies you see, you know, it's all glorified, you know. It isn't, you know. So, and there's guys that have seen more and done more than I did, you know. It depends on where you're at. So, I have a friend of mine that he was in the Marine Corps. He was a sergeant. And he'd been cleared well, it's hard to tell where, but they went on the biggest battle they had to. We went to Wonton or something like that. Anyway, he was in there. Went all the way there, that reservoir.
The Chosin Reservoir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's a brutal battle.
Then you went there, and they found out that the enemy was on the hills. So you might have read about it. So he was wounded bad. He had a medal in his head, and very nice guy. He lives in Roseville.
And you connected with him after the war?
Well, I didn't know him till after after I got out of the service. And we got talking about things, you know. But he was strictly a soldier, that guy. I didn't like him at first, because when his boys, about the age of your boys, this has been a few years back, would talk to him, he would stand at attention in front of his dad, and yes sir, no sir, you know. That I didn't like. To me, he's your son.
Yeah.
So you could imagine what it'd be like if your boy stood in front of you.
No, definitely not.
There's a lot happened that I either forget or don't talk about, you know. In fact, this is the first time I've told Joice a few things, you know. So, like when believe it or not, when I first got there, we landed at Incheon. I guess you probably heard about it. We landed at Incheon. And then the truck that took us from there to where we had to hike up that one hill, they had a cabin down there. The GIs did. They had a prostitute in there.
GIs will always find a way to get alcohol and women.
I couldn't believe it. They asked me if I wanted a woman. I said no. You know, Japan's the same way. If you're in Japan, thing about it, they respect you. Though, if you tell them no once, they will not bother you anymore. A day or a week after that, they still won't bother you. In Japan, you know.
Yeah.
They would say, would you like to have a woman? This one woman come up to me, and she says that if I wanted a woman, I have a number one daughter, her daughter. She's number one daughter. We've got nice beds and this and that, you know. So I finally told him, I can honestly say I never went with a woman
Yeah.
over there. And I know one guy, he was a real nice guy. He was going home in about a week, and he went out, got him a gal, and he killed himself.
No.
It bothered him so much. And he's a good friend. He just couldn't take it going home with venereal disease. And the Army medics told him, you don't have to worry. You'll be over it by then, you know. But I guess it got to him too much, you know. So, well, I don't know what else to tell you unless you...
I've got a couple of questions, if you're still okay for a few minutes, Joe. When you were on the front lines, what did you eat?
What did I eat?
Yeah, what were you eating?
I'll tell you what I ate was K rations from World War II. And they were pretty good. We had cookies about that big around in a can. Everything's in a vacuum can. And that's what we had. Except when you're in the rear echelon, you have the cooks. And being just three of us radio men, we didn't get in line. We were friends with the cook. We'd go around the backside of the tent and he'd dish out a plate of food and give it to us. We didn't have to stand in a long line.
I feel like you just knew everybody, like the
Not
right
really,
people to know.
It was, I knew the lieutenants real good and the sergeant. Oh, we had one sergeant, the poor guy who, he had a mustache, you know, and he's been in there long before I got there. So he's been in quite a bit, you know. And the guy shot himself in the foot because we was going to go on a battle. He shot himself on the foot. He just couldn't take it no more. And I happened to be on the radio and heard everything. And the lieutenant knew the sergeant. And he told the medics to write the report down that he was accidentally shot in the foot. He didn't tell them he did it on purpose. So that lieutenant was pretty good.
Let him get out, basically.
So then they should never, I say, they should never send anybody back to the front line, which they did. Because this one guy that got hit with the same shell I did, he got up and hollered for the medics and ran to where the medics were. He just got back out of the hospital. And there he's going right back again, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody that's got hurt on a line like that should be sent back, you know. Because they got a lot of guys that can replace it with. So, but anyway. It was a great day when they called my name to go.
Yeah, I bet. Something that I try to ask a lot of the people that I talk to, one is, as you recall being on the front lines, what's one of the most selfless or courageous things that you saw?
Just say that again, what I saw?
Yeah, what was one of the more selfless or courageous things that you saw from someone else?
Well, I don't know that I've seen any of it because whenever you're on a being attack or something like that, you're there for survival. You're not there for the USA. You're there for yourself, you know. So I really, because you're so busy, you know. So I had two guys come at me. The lieutenant thought I was cracking up, I guess, because I was doing the wounded all the time, helping the medics. And he had me go in a foxhole. He said, I want you to stay there. So I got in a foxhole. I no sooner got in there, two other guys came to where I was, and wanted to know if I would attend their machine gun because they were freezing to death, you know. So I no sooner got in that machine gun nest, right below me, a machine gun opened up. And, oh, I thought I had it. It was ours. It wasn't theirs.
And it opened up on you?
No,
Oh.
but they were so close, I thought it was. So,
what do you recall as being maybe the hardest thing you had to do when you were over there?
when I was over there, I think the hardest thing I did was take care of the kids.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while it gets to me. You try to think of something else, but it don't leave you.
The sounds and the sights, I imagine.
Pardon?
Both just what you heard and what you saw. The sound of that person and
Well,
what
I
they
don't
look
know.
like.
It just comes to you.
Yeah.
You know, it just. Sometimes I can't talk about it.
No problem. No problem. And actually, if we look at the part of your life after the war, do you recall when you went to the Korean War Memorial for the first time in Washington, D.C.?
No, kind of. It didn't bother me, but I was glad to see it. You know, the memorial. And the only thing I didn't like, and I think it's not right, the other memorial where they got the wall with all the. I think they deserve more than that.
For the Vietnam Memorial?
I mean, just the guy's name there. I thought that was lousy, you know. And another thing that got to me was in the Korean War, you had every nation, United Nations, in there fighting. That is a war. We had our Navy, Army, Air Force, the whole thing. And then they call it a police action. Whenever you're fighting somebody and you got every nation in the United Nations there fighting, you know, and they call it a police action.
Yeah.
That really got to me. That's why they always send me this literature to help the vets and this and that. I won't have a thing to do with them because I wasn't even recognized as a Korean veteran. Just a policeman is all I was, you know. And to me, that's not right.
No, that's not.
So.
People will hear it referred to as the forgotten war.
Yeah.
How does that register with you when you hear that?
Well, I try not to let it bother me. And I joined the Legion, and they don't even recognize me as a Korean vet, you know. I don't know what they recognize me yet. But I quit them. They send me literatures and all that.
Yeah.
I don't even so I don't answer them no more. Then lately they sent me a letter, I got it somewhere in there, that they finally recognize the Korean War as a war, you know. So I had some funny things happen, but it's just so many things you just don't remember.
I know.
The older you get, the harder it is.
Yep. Can I ask when September 11th happened, since you were there at Pearl Harbor, right? I think for a lot of us, my generation, that was our version of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
We will remember where we were. What was 9/11 like for you when that happened?
9/11? I can't think of it.
Yeah, just it was
Oh, wait a minute. 9/11 was
the
the
attacks
buildings there.
coming down.
I thought it was wrong. Of course, everybody else did. But to me, I felt that it was an act of war. That we got people that were good people and everything got killed. I think that we should have gone over there and wiped them out, So, just like now, you take today, you hear the news about China. Well, to me, China is a powerful nation. I mean, they got everything there. And they're not afraid of us, They shouldn't be, but I don't know. It just irritates me that they're getting away with what they have. And even our Congress, we got a bunch of crooks.
Yeah. Well, some things don't really change, I think.
Anyway.
One of the questions I try to ask everybody, and we're almost done here, Joe. One is, when you were in Korea, was there anything that you wanted to have on you when you were on the front lines that maybe Joice gave you, a good luck charm, a necklace?
Believe it or not, before we were married, her mom gave me a pipe and slippers. And then we says, when we get married, we weren't married yet. I said, when we get married and have our family, I'm going to smoke this pipe. I carried that pipe all through Korea.
Did you?
Yeah. I carried it with me, and I smoked it when I first kid.
When did you? When you had your first kid?
Yeah.
That's great. Where did you keep it? Just in your pack?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been so long ago. But there's a lot of good things that happen, but I forget.
Yeah. I will say, I've never heard somebody with a pipe before. I ask all the veterans this, and maybe there's 10 who never took anything. They just didn't want anything with them. But I've heard some funny ones. One guy carried around his wife's underwear, which I think any combat vet will laugh at.
That's funny.
It is, yeah. And obviously pictures of their spouse or their kids or a necklace that somebody had given them. But I always find a new one here or there, and a pipe is a new one for me. Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Joe, for the service, for taking the time to talk.
I wish I could remember more things. I'll probably think about it later on.
That's all right.
So it does me good to get off my shoulder. Yeah.
I think there are going to be a lot of people who, I know there's going to be thousands of people who listen to this. Just, we have done a terrible job of remembering this war, especially as brutal as it was, and the number of countries involved. Like, it wasn't just some unilateral action. And I'm just grateful that you opened your home and let us come in and chat with you about it. Thank you.
Well, at first I was kind of hesitant about it because I didn't want to bring it back. But now I feel differently.
Thank you.
And I think you did a good job.
Thanks. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Joe.
After Joe and I wrapped up, his wife Joice came and sat with us, and we talked through a few of the experiences they had together with his time in Korea. And I think you'll find them very interesting. She remembers a lot more than he does in some cases, as is the case with many marriages. But it's worth a listen. I hope you enjoy this as well.
A box of letters.
Yeah, and these here he wrote before we were married. And then these, and he called me
From Korea?
from the hospital to tell me he was hurt but okay. We were only married. We were married the 31st of December in 1950. And then he was called into the service March the 15th. So when he went to Camp Robertson after he got through with his basics, I went down there and got a job at the cleaners, and I could tailor his clothes and stuff. And I got a place off base, and so we got our weekends and evenings, and the letters he wrote to me, I kept, and they have the different outfits he was with. But his letters he had to burn to get warm because it was so cold. And he didn't tell you that his can of peaches froze inside his jacket.
That's
It
how
was
cold
so
it was.
cold there. And I would bake cookies and send them at least every other week, because it costs almost $20. I only made $40 a week, so cost about $20, to bake them and send him a package. So I tried to get him packages and tried to write every day, and then that's when I put the sachet in it. And so he has more stories that he could tell, and they had no idea of PTSD. I mean, he just came home and went back to life.
Yeah.
And always been a good provider and a good father, and we have 5 wonderful kids, and I think the last count is 23 great grandkids and 17 grandkids, and so we've had a wonderful life, blessed, because so many people would like to be still with us, and still with their loved one, and we've been blessed.
Did you notice, because you knew him before for some time, and then after, and you mentioned the PTSD, did you notice any difference in demeanor when he returned?
The difference is when he doesn't feel well, the memories flood back easier.
Yeah.
When you're feeling better, and he just had out of the hospital was 6 weeks from having his last heart attack. So.
Wow.
So it's we've been blessed.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, I mean, you got family here with you.
Oh
That's
my!
special.
And this is just part.
I know. You've got your own little platoon or company of grandkids and great grandkids.
You two gonna?
We're working on it.
Well, they're
now it's up to
gonna
him.
get married, and if they have 4, and you got 4, it's gonna add up.
That's right.
Before you know it, you mind where did time go?
Yeah, and our kids, each one, blessing, and they do kind of tag team. Different ones coming. So.
Yeah. You mentioned I thought I overheard one of these letters was a telegram when he got injured.
Yeah, I think it's this one.
And did you already know, Joice, that he was injured?
He called me.
It's lucky, because I bet you probably would have gotten an earful if she learned the other way.
Collect call from Korea, but Yeah. Yes, I'll take a call.
So this says, the Secretary of the Army has asked me to express his deep regret that your husband, Private Joice Joseph M. Jr., was wounded in action in Korea on 26 November 51. Address, mail, quote, rank, names. Okay. So, but I wonder, they regret to inform you, but you were probably happy because it meant you were coming home or you were off the front
Well,
lines.
he was off the front lines, and we thought he was going to be able to come home,
But at least off the front lines.
Yeah. But then Busan, he took a lot of Korean pictures of the area and stuff of Korea.
I had a lot of friends over there when I get mail call because they know they got cookies.
Yeah, I feel like you were a pretty popular guy. Like perfume and cookies made you very popular. Oh, man. All right. Well, Joice, anything else you think we should just mention before we break here?
Well, I just, when he does something, he does it wholeheartedly. And wherever he goes, he makes friends. And so, and everything is black and white. There's not too many grays. I mean, if it's right, it's right. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. And although he felt he was right to go because he was called, he felt it was wrong that you didn't fight to win.
Yeah.
You fought for a 38th parallel.
The stalemate. Yeah.
You know. And so if you fight, you need to fight to win, and you need to know when you won.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
There has to be a peace. There has to be a goal. And a 38th parallel does not seem like a goal.
Yeah, and not that it's any consolation, but certainly the war that I fought in Afghanistan, no clear outcome there, and
yeah, I mean,
we look back on very similarly, I think.
Yeah, and bless you guys, because you're the best of the best. Yes, you are. All of you. I mean, you don't have to do this. There's always ways. You don't have to do these things. But rights, I mean, you know, if your country calls, and we need to get back to where when our country calls, it's for a better cause.
Some of these people who I've interviewed recently from this war, who probably spent 12 or 13 years at war combined, when I asked them about, like, how do you think veterans from Korea and Vietnam and World War II would look on what we did, and one of the guys who I have a lot of respect for said, you know, I spent all these years in Baghdad and Afghanistan. That's nothing. That's like 30 seconds compared to these people who were in the Chosin Reservoir, Normandy. To him, it's not even close, and he did things I could never imagine. And so I think there's just a ton of respect from our generation to the Vietnam veteran, the Korean War veterans, World War II.
Yeah.
Like, as we look back, as I'm sure you did, Joe, looking on the World War II and World War I vets and what they went through. So it continues. But what I really appreciate on more of a lighter note, some of the funny things that happen, it doesn't matter what war you're in, the making friends, like what you're sent, what you carry with you, like the mail you get, and the dumb things that happen and the bad decisions people make. That never changes, and I think that creates quite a bond across generations.
And all of them, you get a group of guys together. There's going to be.
Actually, Val, I don't know if were you in here when he told the story of trying to get out of the base in the trunk of her car? Do you remember Jared Adams in Germany? He tried to get into the Czech Republic in the the trunk of a car.
Yeah.
He made it though. He made it through.
Yeah, he forgot his passport.
His driver wasn't as nervous as that one.
No, but those are young. We were officers, but it doesn't matter.
I think he taught at West Point for a while.
He did, yeah. So anyway, some of those things don't change. So I would just say thank you for letting us into your home and the time, and thank you to Josh for your that's your great grandson, right?
Call him.
No, just grandson.
Grandson. Thank you to him for connecting us.
He has 3.
Thank you, Joe.
3 great.
3 of your great grandkids.
Yeah, he had 3 of my great.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.